All right, this is the last video for the Biosphere Unit 5. Your question for today is, what are 2 benefits of biodiversity? And you'll find that from yesterday's video. But today we're going to talk about agriculture. So agriculture plays a very important role in our ecosystem. Traditional agriculture is considered to be agriculture powered by people and animals. It does not require fossil fuels, and it's practiced widely, or it was practiced widely, until the Industrial Revolution. So until machines started being made that did the work for us. Industrial agriculture requires the use of fossil fuels. It is often a mechanized farming technology equipment. It's manufactured chemicals, and it's usually large-scale irrigation as well. So to be efficient, large areas are planted with a single crop and what we call a monoculture. So these crops that you see, like especially if you go to Iowa, Illinois, Nebraska, all of those, Indiana up in there, all of those are corn producing. So when you drive through these states, all you see are cornfields for miles upon miles upon miles. It's a single crop for that culture to grow. Okay. Today, there's more than 25% of the world's croplands that are supporting industrial agriculture. So 25% of the croplands in the entire world are supported by machines, industrial irrigation, and these chemicals that they use for the single crop monoculture. Okay, there are some farms, there are actually quite a few farms that are still done by animals and by people. Okay, so it's not all mechanized. So there are things that we can do to help our crops grow. Pests and weed control. Think about pesticides or insecticides. These are chemicals. They are effective and they are cheap. But the problem is that if you use them too often or too much, the crops can actually grow a resistance to that. Or the bugs can actually grow a resistance to that. Okay. So think about if you're sick and you need an antibiotic. There are some people who have been sick so often, have taken antibiotics so often, that they have built up a resistance to that antibiotic, and that antibiotic doesn't help them. Or there are flus or illnesses that have built up a resistance to certain antibiotics. So antibiotics does not help with those types of illnesses. We also have biological pest controls. This is a permanent solution, but it can harm non-target organisms. Okay? So think about the cactus moth. That's the image you see here on the left. These are the larvae that are of cactus moth. They were used to control the prickly pear cactus. Okay, so to keep the prickly pear cactus organism down in number. But the problem with these moth larvae is that they also threaten rare native cacti around the world. Okay, so it doesn't just affect the prickly pear cactus. It's not specific to them. It's all over. Okay, cane toads here in this image. Cane toads were introduced in Australia to control what they call the cane beetle. But because they had so many cane beetles and these cane toads started to populate, the cane toads are now what is in control and overpopulating the area. It's no longer the cane beetle they have a problem with, but now cane toads. Okay, so you have to be very careful with your pest control. We also have what's called integrated pest management, and this is where you bring in chemical or biological pest control methods, and you're kind of combining them. So it's not just one solid thing, and this is becoming ever more popular with farming and livestock as to how to control these situations, is to kind of use both methods, not just one anymore. So we have pollinators. Pollinators are bees, other insects. Agriculture relies very heavily on the pollinators. You can have native pollinators and you can have domesticated pollinators. Domesticated could be those invasive that have come in, are non-harmful but actually beneficial. But some of these populations of pollinators have declined because of pesticide use or parasites or even other unknown causes that we haven't discovered yet. Common pollinators, bees especially, usually pollinate about 800 species of cultivated plants. 800 species. That's not 800 plants. That's 800 types of plants. Okay. GMOs. I don't know how many of you have heard of GMOs. It's kind of been a big thing recently. This is genetically modified organisms. And this is organisms that have had their DNA, the structure of themselves, modified or changed. So they're basically chemically engineered plants. Okay? It includes some of these traits that they're being given is rapid growth, pest resistance, and frost tolerance. Okay? Those things sound great, right? But when you have GMOs, it's including those other chemicals into those plants that may not be completely going away within the plant system. So for example, if you take in let's say an antibiotic or something, that stays in your system for X amount of hours or X amount of days. Okay? These chemicals are staying in these plants even once they leave the soil and are no longer getting it until they even reach your table and you're ingesting them. So GMO has had a lot of controversy as to whether it's actually a good thing or not and whether we should actually be ingesting plants that are GMOs. So in the United States, 85% of corn, 90% of the soybeans and cotton and canola crops are all GMO. Okay, and these are the top 10 genetically modified foods. So corn, that's the biggest. Soy, that's another one. So if any of you are lactose intolerant and drink soy milk, soy is a GMO. Cottonseed, papaya, rice, canola rapeseed. That's the canola crop, so what you see in canola oil. Potatoes are even GMOs now. Tomatoes, dairy products, so even if you're not lactose intolerant, here's your dairy products, and peas. That's the top 10 that are commonly GMO foods. So here are some risks. You have a potential for what we call a super pest. It's resistant to pest-resistant crops. Okay, so a super pest is kind of like a super bug. It gets in, it still infects it, even though that crop or that body is classified as pest resistant. Okay, and it also will contaminate non-GM plants. So because you have plants that are being pollinated from bees and other insects, it will actually take some of that GMO and pollinate it and cross-contaminate into plants that are non-GMO plants. So those are some of your risks. But again, there are also benefits. So there's a lot of controversy with this. So insect-resistant crops will reduce the need for insecticides. Well, that's great. A lot of insecticides are extremely harmful to the body. Okay? Herbicide-resistant crops, those encourage tillage conservation. Okay? So you're looking at taking away having to use extra chemicals to create these crops that don't have damage to them from insects, herbicides, insecticides, pests, all of this. So those are some benefits, but again, at what risk are we taking that? So industrial food production, we have feedlots. You don't really see a lot of these feedlots around here. Out in Nebraska, Kansas way, there are a lot of feedlots out that way. This is an alternative to open grazing. So these animals are given energy-rich food that's delivered to livestock or poultry. So as you can see from the images here, they have these feed troughs that go for, hundreds of feet or for maybe even a mile, where the animals can come in, get their fill, go back, and let the next set of livestock come in and feed. And there are usually an abundance of hundreds to thousands of animals in these feedlots, whether that's poultry or livestock. Benefits of this is that it reduces soil degradation. So they're not always constantly feeding on the soil and the grass and taking that away. It reduces fertilizer use. but it does have a cost. So it does have some non-benefits, some disadvantages. You have to have antibiotics for this. You can have water contamination with this. So their water source can easily be contaminated. And you have animal stress. When you have that many animals packed in tight like that, all trying to get to a food source and, probably thinking, I'm not going to get fed today, it can be a lot of stress on the animal and cause some various chemicals to be released in their body that shouldn't be. Sustainable agriculture, it doesn't deplete the soil faster than it forms, and it does not reduce the amount or the quality of the soil, the water, or the genetic diversity that's essential to long-term crop and livestock production. So sustainable agriculture is kind of what we're all thriving for. And last thing for today, we have organic agriculture. Organic is kind of a big term that you really hear now. It's sustainable agriculture, and it does not use synthetic chemicals. Now, again, synthetic chemicals. It still uses chemicals, but not synthetic chemicals. So it's using natural chemicals for this. Local small-scale agriculture is going to reduce the use of fossil fuels and the chemicals that they use for their transportation and storage. So that's also a plus for organic. And that's it for agriculture.